There's a few dimensions to traction that I think you want to demonstrate to investors, and I'm going to give you what I think those 4 dimensions are, and they're in a specific order because I think that they become more important the further I go into this list. Number 1, quantity. So quantity of traction, it is important, but it's first for a reason. If I look at an investor, or as an investor, if I look at your pitch and I see a whole bunch of logos, that's impressive. I want to see a lot of logos. I want to see a diverse stream of revenue. I want to see diverse feedback that you're getting from your customers. I want to see that you don't have just one industry to conquer. You can go to 5 or 6 or 7 industries, and that's how you build big companies with big valuations. But that being said, it is better to have more logos, but there needs to be some level of quality to the logos. I come from Charlotte. If you're in Charlotte and you're a startup, there's some obvious companies that you want to work with. There's Bank of America, there's Wells Fargo, there's Duke Energy. And these are great logos to have, do not get me wrong. That can change the game, landing one of these big clients. But the reality is that if you're just doing a $5,000 pilot at Bank of America, it's good that you have it. It's better that you have that. But I want to see things that start to move into these next 3 categories of traction that I'm going to lay out. So I talked about quantity, but I also think quality is very important. And again, getting a Fortune 20 client is a great way to validate product market fit. It's a great way to validate that you've got a big market. And it does mean a lot to have those bigger clients. Unfortunately, many of these large clients have very strict corporate communication policies. And trying to get a case study out of a Bank of America, good luck. It's probably not going to happen. That being said, though, I still say that having a Bank of America as a client is very important. But it's not as important as what I think these next 2 categories are, which is I want to see depth. I want to know, do you have a customer who is using everything that you sell? Do you have a customer who is bleeding the color of your product and who really, really is transforming their business? That's the kind of thing that becomes scalable. Selling shelfware that gets literally thrown on the shelf and is not used over time, that's one-time revenue. You're not going to get feedback from that customer. You aren't going to get a lot of revenue from that customer. You're probably going to end up having some churn. And so I think the depth of those relationships is really important. And it's not too hard to demonstrate depth. Stephen talked a little bit about this idea of storytelling that Jobs was very famous for. And to me, the number one way to communicate the depth of what's happening with your client, and I don't care if this is for a sales pitch or this is for an investor pitch, or if it's trying to hire employees, being able to just tell a story about what is it that you're doing for this client. How are you changing this customer's world, and why is it so important? That's very compelling for an investor. Again, it demonstrates that not just can you stack up these logos, but you can actually turn them into revenue. And more importantly, I think, is you can get feedback from that customer, because your customer knows better, in most cases, knows better what they need than you do, unfortunately, as an entrepreneur. And then, for me, the real nirvana of traction is what I call advocacy. And every startup that I've been involved with that has had a successful exit, that has been a successful startup, has had some bookend clients, if you will, who satisfy all 4 of these. Obviously, they add to the quantity, they become a quality logo, and then they become a logo that you go deep with, and then they become an advocate. And these are, I have people from my network who I started tapping 15 years ago. Hey, Bank of America wants to talk to one of our customers. And I had a gentleman at Geico who must have done 20 of these calls for me. And there is nothing that sells a product better than a big company who has gone deep and has a quality relationship with a product. There's no better way to sell a product. And I don't care how you go about scaling. I don't care about lead generation. All of those things, none of that is as important as the ability for a client to say, we couldn't have done this without this vendor. So for me, that's really important to try to move as far as you can into not just having more traction, but actually having better traction. And I think that, not to get too tactical, but when you think about how, if you're going and raising money and you're talking to an investor and you want to demonstrate your traction, it really doesn't need to be more than probably 3 or 4 slides, depending on the size of your deck. You should have something that demonstrates the quantity. Everybody's got it. Everybody's seen this part of every single slide deck. Here's our 12 logos that we've got. But then you need to be able to show, how deep are we going? Can I show a timeline for a specific customer where I show the first time we got a meeting with them, when they signed the first PO, and then each subsequent PO that follows on to that, and the amount of revenue tied to that customer? That is very compelling to an investor. So I see you've got 12 logos. I see how you put $1 million ARR deal together with a specific client. And then you want to see some client testimonials, right? If you've got people who are willing to talk about why your product is changing their world, the investors need to see that. And it kind of humanizes it, and it puts together like, well, this isn't just a matter of revenue. This isn't just a matter of a number of logos and a sales process that we're following, but we actually have a great story to tell, and here's what our customers are saying about us. So I don't think it's too difficult to communicate this, but again, I can't stress enough, the focus on traction is much more important than the focus on, this is the product that we're building and this is where we're going with the product and this is why I think it's great. Those clients really validate it in a way that's very difficult for an entrepreneur or somebody on the team to validate.